So I'm going to do a devotional today called The Downside of Charismatic Prayer. Yep, you heard me right. There's a downside to it. And I'm going to explain this further today. You don't want to listen to the whole thing. From the ages of 16 to 20, I was at a church that was a sister church of Brooklyn Tabernacle. Brooklyn Tabernacle is famous for their Grammy-winning choir, and they boast over 13,000 members. But let me share with you a major secret to their success. The Brooklyn Tabernacle is known for a church that centers around their weekly prayer meetings. Jim Cymbala, the senior pastor, wrote the book, Fresh Wind, Fresh Fire, which centers around the miraculous things that have happened around these prayer meetings. This is one of the best books on prayer you can find, and the stories in this book will really blow your mind. These people know how to pray like nothing I've ever seen. And they taught me how to pray and cry out to God, much like David did in the Psalms, crying out to him with my whole heart. I find that inner city churches tend to face inner city problems that really lead them to their knees because they're dealing with really serious problems. Some of these people have nothing else but God, and that is their secret weapon because they're desperate. Churches should be built around lively prayer meetings. I'm seeing more and more churches these days move away from prayer meetings. And if they do have them, people don't really show up. In some cases, in modern cases, people will show up for worship nights, but not for the prayer meeting. This is a major problem in the modern church. I was well known for praying fervent prayers based on my early days at learning how to pray from this Brooklyn Tabernacle sister church. Very often, I would pray for people, and they would say that they've never heard anyone pray like me, like they did in their whole entire life. Not until I came across Emotionally Healthy Discipleship, which I talk a lot about on this channel, had I realized that there was something seriously missing with this style of prayer. The charismatic way of praying had serious flaws. My mindset on prayer was blown up when I realized I was really having just a one-way conversation with God. I was doing all the talking, and I was the one giving orders. I was the one giving commands. Now that I look back at that style of prayer, I feel like I was treating God in some ways like a personal assistant who worked for me, telling him how things were going to go, and many times they didn't turn out that way. Here's a quote from The Celebration of Discipline. If you never read this book by Richard Foster, this book is one of the best books I've read, on top 10 in my Christian life. Read it. But one of the quotes from A Celebration of Discipline on page 36, he said, "For years I had prayed for many things with great intensity, but it with only marginal success. Then I saw that I could possibly be doing something wrong." Part of this is because of bad teaching in the charismatic world, such as the Word of Faith movement, which states that we can speak anything to existence at will. And a lot of modern charismatics would reject this line of thinking. God remedies this in my life, in my personal life, by just being very silent on situations, and I had to wait on him. And often he would make me wait for years. And I realized I really wasn't the boss. I wasn't the one calling the shots. Waiting for years. When you wait on God, all your pride is stripped from you. You learn that he is God and you are not, for sure. Now, we should pray with faith. Hebrews 11:6 says, "Without faith it's impossible to please God. We must believe he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him." James 3:16 says, "The prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective." Elisha was a human being, even as we were. He prayed earnestly that it would not rain, and it did not rain on the land for 3.5 years. So we can pray, and pray with faith, and great power and authority. But first, try to understand that there are different types of prayer. In the book on prayer by Richard Foster, he shows 21 different types of prayer. Now, prayers over sickness and disease and deliverance should be prayed with force and authority. Jesus never prayed, "If thy will be done," prayers in these cases. Intercessory prayer in many cases should be authoritative. But, as Soren Kierkegaard said, a man prayed and at first thought that prayer was talking. But he became more and more quiet until he realized in the end that prayer is listening. A majority of times, prayer is not meant to change God, but for God to change us. Especially in everyday life matters and in matters of guidance. Forster concludes this on his chapter on prayer. One of the most critical aspects in learning to pray is to get in contact with God and that His life and power can flow through us. Unfortunately, often we assume that we are in contact with Him when we are not. So people pray with all the faith in the world, but nothing happens. So what's the remedy according to Forster? He says this: we begin praying by first quieting our fleshly activity and listening to the silent thunder of the Lord of hosts. Attuning ourselves to divine breathing is spiritual work. But without it, our praying will be vain repetition. Friends, there are times to pray with great authority and boldness. But the majority of times, I now approach God with practicing silence and solitude. I look to connect with Him. I look to embrace His love for me. I look to hear His voice and to discern His will. One sentence from God is more powerful than 10,000 words from men. Let us be people that pray with great power and authority when necessary, but in our own personal prayer closet. Learn to be silent and still before the Lord. As Psalm 46 says, "Be still and know that I am God." And in those silent places, we can hear His voice. We can hear those whispers. Let us not forget the great task of listening to God, listening to the Holy Spirit while praying, and make sure that we're not doing all the talking. I pray that you would be blessed today. Remember, Christianity is 3 things: to love God with our whole heart, mind, and soul, to love other people, and to spread the great commission of making disciples of all nations, preaching the gospel in all the world. I hope you're blessed today, and I hope this devotional spoke to you and will get you to spend more time in prayer listening to God. Be blessed.